You know, if there were prizes handed out to political parties for their lack of organisational skill, the gong would go to the New South Wales Liberal Party. Between the New South Wales branch, federal MP Alex Hawke and former Prime Minister Scott Morrison, they managed to ruin any chance the party had of winning several seats in New South Wales at the last federal election. They simply couldn't agree on who should have been pre-selected and who should actually make those decisions. Well, they may have just outdone themselves because, as we discussed briefly on the program last night, they've just hopelessly derailed their campaign for the upcoming New South Wales local government elections. Somehow, the party's New South Wales executive missed the deadline to nominate candidates for several key council elections. Can you believe that? Liberal opposition leader Mark Speakman demanded the State Director, Richard Shields, explain what had happened, but later called for him to resign. Shields has already publicly apologised. Let's bring in Matt Camenzuli, a former state executive for the party, but now expelled, who took former Prime Minister Scott Morrison to court over the 2022 pre-selection stuff-up. Matt Camenzuli, thank you so much for your time. This is Party Admin 101. They'd forget to buy a raffle ticket at the pub for the Friday night meat trade, wouldn't they?
Yeah, look, I mean, you know, they say you can't fatten the pig on market day when it comes to elections. And I think to some extent, to just blame this on the administrative wing of the party, and they do have a part to play, is probably wrong. You've also got to blame all these factional players and all the same people that we've been fighting over democracy for a very long time, Chris. It's all part of the same dirty, disgusting, filthy problem.
Hang on. I thought this was a mistake, Matt. I thought that there was a stuff-up. I thought someone didn't put the envelopes in the mail. You are alluding to the fact that maybe this was done on purpose.
Look, there are accidents and then there are accidents. What I'd say to you is it's been a failure of process at a number of levels. I'm not sure they fully intended to get it this wildly wrong. Nobody would have fully intended to get it this wildly wrong because there are going to be ramifications now. I mean, this is a big, big problem. But what I'd say is this. If you look at the processes that got to the point where the last ballots, I read some article that said the last ballots were getting passed to endorse candidates at 10 a.m. And the nominations were closing at 12 p.m. on the same day, on Wednesday. Same day, open and close. You cannot have this happen by accident. So what I'd say to you is, a lot of the times when there are factional games being played in the background, time is one of the players on the field. Time is one of the key players that they use. If you remember, Alex Hawke, and I alleged this in my cases, and Alex never ever defended this point, that they were running the clock to put pressure on executive, to put pressure on the federal executive, to put pressure on MPs. Pressure makes people act in sort of more erratic and more aggressive ways. The pressure was built on purpose, I think, as it always is. People like Mark Couret running around doing negotiations, pretending he had nothing to do with it now, but of course he was the master chef of a number of negotiations in a number of areas, particularly areas where they didn't have a conference to have democratic selections. And then, you know, Don putting all these ballots in timelines that suit himself and, you know, getting exactly the right number of executive members and not moving until they've all, you know, done all the right transactions. Mate, it's a big mess. It's what happens. It's the political process, but it's a filthy political process. And it just sets democracy aside. And then when you can't get the outcomes, I guess, that you want, you just forget to put forms in. I don't know if that was on purpose, but I tell you what, there's a funny pattern in all of this, and I don't like it.
The Daily Telegraph is running a report tonight that suggests that the deadline was 12 p.m, as you rightly pointed out there, but the executive thought the deadline was 5 p.m. Huh?
That's utter nonsense. Nonsense. These people have one job. They're all good at reading documents. Half the people are lawyers inside the joint. You can't tell me they didn't know this. That's ridiculous. If they want you to believe that, it's either absolute incompetence or just complete stupidity. You pick between those two. You know, it's not possible, not possible.
Okay, I had a conversation today with an upper house MP in the Legislative Council, of course, And he said to me that the strong rumour around the House is that these 12 local government areas will not have a candidate because the majority of those candidates for the Liberal Party were far too conservative for the executive.
Look, I think you'll find, as always, with the Liberal Party under the stewardship of people like Alex Hawke and, Don Harwin, there are some conservatives that they'll accept, but they're not the ones that I would consider to be conservatives. I think they're transactional people, and the transactional people always seem to get their way, get along, whatever else, and you'll know who they are. You'll see that, there were always 3 factions included in all of the things that went on when I was there, and it was the same players, and it's the same players now. I won't mention any names, but it's the same players all the time, and they're coming across 3 factions. I think there are 2 factions. I think there is the Gladys Berejiklian faction, those that are, as the court upheld, the seriously corrupt, and then there's everybody else. And you can make of that what you want, Chris, but I think there are some real problems in that division, and I think it needs a solid broom. I think Don Harwin needs to take this. He needs to take a chunk of this on him.
Yep.
I think Mark Speakman, allowing Mark Curray, needs to take a chunk of this on him. And I think, without doubt, Richard Shields also had his part to play in this through whether it's incompetence or, malfeasance, misfeasance. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter. The result's the same. Imagine this was a federal election. Imagine you had a candidate that's been campaigning in the field for 12 months. The writs get issued and HQ forget to send their form in. Could you imagine that happening at a federal election?
Okay, Matt, I'm thinking about council elections on the South Coast where Peter Dutton needs to win seats, and these elections at local government level aid that process. You've just put Dutton behind the 8 ball.
Well, look, I think in some cases those councils have always run independents, and there are people that are in the Liberal Party that have always run independent. They don't want to run party politics in those areas. You've got some good solid councillors down in places like Kiama. I won't mention any names again, but there are some good people there. That's useful. But yeah, look, when you get these things wrong and people are stopped from running because they were going to run as Liberals, the Liberals stuffed up the forms, and now it's broken the entire system. You're giving people like Simon Holmes a Court and the Teals free kicks. You're giving Labor free kicks. And I don't see the purpose in giving your enemy a free kick.
Very quickly, what are your thoughts on the performance of the new opposition leader, Mark Speakman?
Look, I think Mark is a very intelligent man. I think he's a very decent guy. I don't think he's a bad human being. I do think he struggles to get cut through. I mean, what you need, I think, at the front sometimes in these political spaces is someone who can do a little bit of a political stunt occasionally to get the cut through.
Yeah.
You need people who've got the ability to get cut through. I mean, I've been, just as an example, I just watched John Ruddock, climb Mount Warning and do a stunt. I mean, these are the sorts of things you have to do in opposition. I don't think Speakman, I think his instincts are to act as though he's the opposition spokesman for the government. I think he's very staid. I don't think he's getting the cut through. I think he's a great guy, but I don't think he'll ever get the cut through. All
right, while we're giving personality assessments, what about Peter Dutton? I get the feeling at least he's having a red-hot crack.
Look, I mean, Dutton's stealing a narrative he did a great job on The Voice. I think he did a really good job there. I think he's done a great job putting nuclear on the agenda. I still think there's a little bit more room for him to oppose bad ideas coming out of the Albanese Labor government. I think it's the worst Labor government in the history of, or at least certainly in my living memory, in my memory, but certainly I think he's one of the worst in history. So, I think that some of the things that he's doing around free speech, I think he could do a little better there. I think he could do a little better on, some of the digital ID stuff and some of the things that are just concerning people. I mean, it's a cost of living election. I think he should be just focusing purely on some key points. 1, cost of living. 2, cost of living. 3, immigration. That's exacerbating cost of living. 4, cost of housing. 5, cost of living. And then the cost of living. I think that's where we are.
I love it. Matt Camenzuli, always good to have you on. We'll talk again.